Thanks for the opportunity to speak on this topic. And we've probably all seen plenty of examples in the media and social media of things that make us cringe from a safety point of view. And so what I'm going to talk about here today is a resource that the Children's Center put together a number of years ago and then just recently updated that talks about media guidelines. And with these media guidelines, it's basically a collection of do's and don'ts for visual and text content that we put out. You can use it when you're dealing with your media contacts. If you see something that's iffy and unsafe that is put out in the media, you can contact that person, follow up with them. Maybe you've got a freelancer or graphic artist who is doing some work for you. This might be a good resource for them. You can also, as we have a slide here later on, we'll show, you can also use it as a resource to be a safety advocate, especially when you're out on social media. So hopefully this will be helpful to you all. Hang on a second. I seem to be temporarily stuck. Okay. So why does this matter? These guidelines that we're going to talk about and making sure that safety is depicted in the farm content that we share, portraying safe practices. It's important because it raises awareness about doing things the right way, doing things safely. It can help us open a conversation about understanding causes of incidents by portraying activities in a safe manner. All the time, we can help establish norms that this is just how you go about your business on a farm. It can break unsafe traditions, we believe. Marcia had the slide with the bury a tradition poster with the child on grandpa's lap. It's these kind of images we want to weed out. And we believe that by portraying this safely all the time and making it a real topic, that we can prevent future trauma incidents. So the rest of the talk will draw heavily upon the do's and don'ts contained in these media guidelines. Now, the guidelines are just two sides of one page, and what you see here are three versions in three different languages. We did some updating lately to reflect some of the social media. There is a special section on children, considerations for children and portraying them safely on a farm, and like keeping, don't have pictures of very small children in the work site, etc. And these were put together, as you use these from a credibility standpoint. These guidelines actually came out of something that the Children's Center did in the 2000s. We had something called the Journalist Workshop for Child Ag Injury Prevention. We held 5 of them around the country, usually in conjunction with another NIOSH Ag Center. And part of these guidelines, they came from advice that we got from the media people and the ag communicators who would participate in these workshops. And so, this isn't something we just created on our own. It was something that we came together on. Now you'll have some media people that will say, well, it's not my job to portray things or go out of my way to portray things, activities in a safe manner. It's my job to reflect what's really happening on a farm. And it's your guys' jobs as safety people to address it. Fair enough, I guess, but overwhelmingly, the media people that we deal with are very much, they want to be part of the solution. They want safer farms. They're big advocates of agriculture, obviously, and they want to help people to do things right. So we found them to be very, very good partners. Some of the don'ts, we see this on social media, and maybe we see more of it as people are at home and the kids are at home and out of school and not participating in activities. You have farm families wanting to celebrate farm life, and a part of that, proud papa moments, we might call it. And part of that might be, as you see on the left, showing pictures of their children all over the equipment, all over the work site. Like we said earlier, that the work site and home often blend together on some farms. And so, okay, that's a tradition, and we acknowledge that they're trying to do this in a very, from their point of view, it's celebrating their lifestyle. But of course, those of us on the call here know that we just see too many news clippings of the small tyke in the work site, and I turned my head for a second, and all of a sudden he was gone, etc. So these are the kind of images that obviously we want to curtail. On the right, we want to be conscious of, there's the adult, very obviously in a supervisory position. You've got fencing. Those are the elements, those positive elements that we really want to be aware of as we're depicting agricultural practices and life on farms. On the left, of course, you can drive through the countryside. Well, back when we used to drive into the office, on your way home from work, and you can see kids on laps of people on their zero-turn lawnmowers. You see multiple kids, or I would, or individuals, on ATVs. You're driving home, and of course, again on the right, we want to portray this in a safe way. We want to have the proper equipment and don't perpetuate any unsafe traditions. Again, here, as far as visuals and large animals, that's another thing you tend to see a lot on social media, and being near the animals, and some very big. Just being aware of the fencing. You see the picture on the right, you've got the fencing, you've got the adult right there. These are things that we want to instill, and the kind of safe depictions we want to show. Okay, so tractor without a roll bar and with a roll bar. Today we just had, it just came out this morning, a pretty nice article in Wisconsin State Farmer publication, newspaper, I guess. And they did a big article on the sort of the revival of this farm fatality report in Wisconsin. Our Ag Imagery News team worked with UW Extension, and they sort of resurrected this report that hadn't been done for about 14 years due to funding and whatnot at UW. Anyway, so the reporter did a really good article in this Ag Weekly, interviewed all the right people and stuff, but among the 3 or 4 pictures they used, it was a picture of a 10-year-old driving a tractor with no ROPS, baling hay or something. And so if you're the reader and you put this up on your screen, it's a good article, but it's a lot of words. And so maybe your eyes don't go to all those words right away. They go to the picture. So it can be very distracting and really send a mixed message. It's another reason we try to adhere to these guidelines and share these guidelines, because it really can throw a reader off and make it seem sort of normal that, oh yeah, a 10-year-old is operating this tractor in a field with no ROPS on top of it. As we're working on our newsletters and looking for items for social media, et cetera, you'll see a picture and like, oh yeah, that's what I want. And your eyes might go to the whatever's in the foreground that you're looking for. And just a reminder again that to be aware of the background elements, because sometimes something can slip in the background that you really would prefer not be there. We want to accent the positive, and so especially with younger people, you want to make sure they have all the proper PPE. They're doing a job that's suited to their ability level, their age, and that they're performing it in a safe manner. And sometimes that does take extra effort, and you'll say, oh, this has everything, but oh, she's not wearing a mask. But we really try to have a zero tolerance for deviating from that, because we feel it's really important to show things the right way. A pet peeve of ours, we see this a lot, probably, or you do as well, I'm sure. There'll be a farming accident, and maybe in an attempt to kind of soften the pain, the spokesperson or the sheriff spokesperson, et cetera, might say, it was a freak accident, or one of the survivors might say, he'd done this 100 times and never had a problem, and it was just a freak accident. And of course, if you look a little closer, it's easy to throw that term around, but if you look closer, the data are probably going to show that this type of event has occurred many times before. It was predictable, and it was preventable. So this isn't all about, these guidelines are not all about visual. It's also about the wording. And if we use the term freak accident, it absolves us of responsibility, sort of insinuating that there's, gosh, there's nothing anybody could have done. And part of breaking unsafe traditions is to be aware of what you can do different and how you can prevent these. Farms are a great place to be. They're oftentimes beautiful. The setting is wonderful, and but at the same time, we want to be realistic about the work that's being done and the nature of the work. It is hazardous. So when we're covering agriculture or depicting it, we want to make sure that that's incorporated as well and reflected. Getting into the second and third bullet points about using this as a teachable moment, really, using our coverage and our depictions to help explain what caused the incident, explaining it's a way to explain safety issues, get to a point where people are noticing that there's no ROPS, like, oh, then sometimes you'll get a reader who'll say, maybe they'll catch you on something that you missed, so you build this awareness and people start looking for this stuff. It's a way to explain safety issues. It's a way to convey the importance of the machinery guarding and the roll bars and going into a grain bin with all the proper items in place. The teachable moment issue is something we always try to do, and maybe you don't do it right after a terrible incident, but we have the Telling the Story project that we do with UMash, or as part of UMash, that was talked about earlier today. Those are, especially in the case of the fatalities that we write about, you've got to give that some time, and the family has to process. So there is a time and a place, but even in the next day stories, and if you're working with your media, there's a way to put in a resource, and media like to do this. If they're covering an incident, and it's the very next day, the emotions are still raw. Okay, we understand this was a difficult moment for the family, terrible moment. But you can put information in there that could be helpful in preventing such a thing in the future and not be judgmental. It could be a simple sentence at the very end, like this last bullet point. Go to your website or cultivate safety. The ending line to be something like, unfortunately, these incidents are all too common. Here's some information that you can use. And when we're talking about resources, this is a good example from this summer. A lot of you may know Janet Davidson down in the lower right. She replied with a link to a safety resource. On the left, you see the original post. It's kind of a proud moment, I guess. Like, look at our son, the little guy. He's on there learning how to use a zero-turn mower, and some of the other comments that I wasn't able to include in the screen here. Yeah, again, very along the same lines of, I started when I was 6 and whatever, doing this or that. We know you're not going to win an argument on Facebook. So if Janet had gone in and right away said, well, ma'am, that child is too young to do that, and you're putting him at risk, et cetera, that probably would have started a big, ugly Facebook fight. But by being able to slip in a resource, and maybe it'll be the media guidelines resource, possibly you can get people thinking and at least introduce that safety element and start the conversation. So that's kind of a once over, and would entertain any questions at this point.
Thank you, Scott. Let's put the screen back up here. That was really helpful, and it was a really powerful reminder just that the words and the images that we choose to use have a lot of power. So choose wisely and do it with safety in mind. And I also appreciated your final note on a tip for how to engage effectively on social media. I think that's something we're all challenged to do in a polarized environment, but to start with less judgment and more coming from a place of being a resource and a source of information, I think is helpful.
Yeah, because a lot of times, certainly in dealing with media, our experiences is, they thank you and they just hadn't thought of it before. Social media is going to be a little more polarized and maybe less open-minded, but sometimes it is just a matter of putting it in a way or framing it in such a way that, hopefully somebody on social media will just think, hey, I hadn't thought of it that way before, and they'll actually appreciate that you did that.
I also just want to point out the National Children's Center and the National Farm Medicine Center have both been fantastic resources for telling and sharing stories. And so I dropped the exhibitor booth information for both of those booths in the chat, and I encourage others to visit and to look at some great resources that are in there. Do we have any other questions?
If I may, I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, Scott had kind of given a little bit of a shout out to Janet Davidson, but I just kind of wanted to highlight that a little bit. I thought it was really fantastic that she did that. She went out and she did that and made that comment and posted that on social media without us even knowing about it. We found out about it afterwards. And I think, my slide ended with being an advocate, and Scott kind of ended talking about that as well. And I think it's extremely important that we all realize that, we can do that. And Jana did a fantastic job of doing that there without necessarily being offensive to the people that put the original post up as well. And she was very, very sensitive to in the manner that she did it. And I think it's great that she did it that way, but I think that we all need to be a little bit more proactive in reacting to those types of things instead of just kind of noting it and then letting it go. So just a real big shout out to her for taking the time and doing that, because I thought it was fantastic that she did.
On that note, I'm curious how either of you would approach if you saw someone posting on social media an unsafe practice that is just a cute photo of their kid. Rather than publicly shaming them, would you engage in any way?
If it was on our website, yeah, or on our Facebook page, and Melissa does a good job with that, either contacting them behind the scenes or most often doing kind of what Jana did. The last thing you want to do is get into a back and forth on Facebook, but oftentimes what Melissa will do is put something out there, plant an idea in people's heads. Hey, this is a resource that can, help parents decide and empower parents to decide whether their child is ready to do a job or not, for instance. I think you can be more proactive and more direct. Well, you certainly can be with media because you're talking professional to professional. It's just not as personal. Over the weekend, I did a little interview with Brownfield Ag News on social media, like don't sacrifice safety for likes and shares. And I got an email from a dairy farmer in southern Wisconsin, and he was really upset and saying I was don't know what I'm talking about and I'm an idiot, and kids of young ages can do a lot of things on a farm. And I didn't take it personally because I thought, oh, he's not talking to me. I don't believe it. I'm not those things. So I emailed him back and I told him where I was coming from. And I said that we're not condemning pictures of life on a farm, and we understand the lifestyle and the passion for that. And I sent him a couple, 3 pictures, and I said, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. And I sent him 2 or 3 really egregious depictions. And then he was like, oh, okay, I get it. Just something to keep in mind on social media. And it's, farmers represent a very small part of the population. They do feel like they're under attack probably a lot. Farm families, people don't understand them. We saw some of this with the child labor laws a few years ago. Something for all of us to be aware of, that they can be very sensitive. So when we're making our point, it's sometimes maybe it's good to lead by example or contact them privately rather than try to do it in a real public forum.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we've gotten a little bit more proactive about is acknowledging the benefits of living and growing up on a farm. We always try to be right up front with the fact that we at the Children's Center want to see children and young workers on farms. We think it's a good environment for them. We think it's healthy for them to be there. You know, some of our microbiome studies are backing that information up. We see less allergies, less asthma, that type of stuff in farm kids overall. And so we try to make it, you know, very evident right up front that we advocate for children and for youth to be on the farms. We just want them to be safe while they're there. We want the parents to realize it's important for them to safeguard them, and the hazards that we see with the social media when something goes viral and it's unsafe is it could artificially establish that this is the norm, you know, that everybody is doing this, and that's something that we don't want to happen. And so that's where it's really great when people can just kind of step in and kind of say, hey, you know, love the fact that, you know, you're raising your kids on the farm. What a great environment to have children. You know, have you ever taken a look at this? And maybe just offer them a resource in that manner. Because again, we want them kids to be there. We think it's a great place for them to be, but we want them to grow up whole and healthy and have the opportunity to grow up as well. So I think it's important that we balance that out. You balance out that, you know, the benefits with those challenges and those risks that are there.
Marcia's approach to leading with the acknowledgement that, you know, we are big fans of agriculture, and farms are great places to grow up, and kids can learn a lot of things on a farm in a way that they wouldn't be able to elsewhere, can really open some doors. Because a couple of years ago, I facilitated an interview with a guy named, his name is Trent Luce, and some of you may have seen his work or heard it on radio. But yeah, I would meet Trent at different conferences and heard him give talks, and he was, you know, struck me as real curmudgeonly and suspicious of Washington and stuff like that. And I didn't know how this was going to go with Marcia, but then she ended up, I think, going way over time. Trent ended up doing multiple segments of the same interview and breaking it up. And Marcia, I'm thinking part of that was because you got off on the right foot with him. I mean, I think he was kind of, you know, kind of trying to figure out where you were coming from early on, but then once you sort of opened that door, it seemed to go pretty well.
Yeah, it really did. And I think the fact with Trent, at least, that I grew up on the farm. And so I had those memories that I could draw on and that I could share, and I could, you know, kind of speak to it from that perspective, probably helped as well. Um, but definitely, I would say that we definitely have seen more positive reactions, both from the media and from the farmers themselves, when we take the time to acknowledge that, you know, farms and ranches are a great place to live and to grow up. So.
Those are great, just communication tips in general. I think I've heard for any negative or any critical statement, provide at least 2, or sometimes I've heard 10 for every negative. Positive statements, though, is helpful. And then just to listen, to understand, and to try to understand where people are coming from before you engage with them. Those are great, effective tips to be a better communicator and more effectively engage.